In a landmark move, President Trump says the U.S. has struck a trade deal with India, slashing tariffs on Indian goods at 18%. Now, the pact has already sparked gains in Indian markets. Take a look at our next report for more on this.
U.S. President Donald Trump on Monday says he agreed to a trade deal with India that cuts U.S. tariffs on Indian goods from 50% to 18%. In exchange, India will lower its trade barriers and halt the purchasing of Russian oil, buying from the United States and potentially Venezuela instead. A White House official told Reuters that the U.S. is removing a punitive 25% duty on all imports from India that it had levied over purchases of Russian oil. That had stacked on top of another reciprocal tariff of 25%. He added that Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi also committed to buying more than $500 billion worth of U.S. energy, technology, agricultural, and other products. U.S.-listed shares of major Indian companies rallied on the news. Trump on Saturday had teased a potential deal for India to buy Venezuelan oil after the U.S. seized Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro in a military raid in early January. The deal comes after months of tense trade negotiations between the world's two largest democracies. Last August, Trump doubled duties on imports from India to 50% to pressure New Delhi to stop buying Russian oil. And earlier this month, Trump said the rate could rise again if India did not curb its purchases. Purchases of Venezuelan oil would help replace some of the Russian oil bought by India, the world's third biggest oil importer. Indian markets have been battered since the tariffs were levied by Washington, making it the worst performing market among emerging nations in 2025.
And well, to give us more detail on this, our correspondent Susan Tehrani sent us this report from New York. Let's listen in.
As both leaders frame this latest tariff deal a win, from the U.S. perspective, the deal gives President Donald Trump something he's been under pressure to show at home: results. Domestically, this helps counter criticism that his trade policies raise costs for businesses and consumers. Inflation. He can now point to lower tariffs, expanded export opportunities, and a major foreign partner agreeing to buy American at scale. Strategically, closer economic alignment with India also strengthens the U.S. position globally, particularly as Washington pushes to isolate Russia's energy revenues. Politically, the deal allows Trump to present himself as a result-driven dealmaker in a midterm election year. Susan Tehrani reporting from New York for WION World is One.
And to discuss more on this, we're now being joined by Mithali Nikor, economist and founder of Nikor Associates. He's joining us live from New Delhi. Thank you so much for joining us. Always great to have you. First of all, let's start with, how do you see this U.S.-India trade deal coming right after the EU-India FTA? Because that was the mother of all deals. How do you read into this?
So some people are saying, if that was the mother of all deals, then is this the grandmother? But honestly, I think there's a lot to unpack here. We don't have many details at this point. I mean, what we have at this point are literally two, Twitter statements, which are not official statements by the governments of either country. They are actually just acknowledgements that, we've made progress and there's going to be a deal. But what are the contours of that deal? What will be the details? I think that needs to officially be announced by both sides, and we need to see those details coming out. But overall, I think my first reaction is this is a step in the right direction. It takes us back to the point in February 2025 when the two leaders had met and had agreed on greater cooperation for India and the US going forward. And I think it's really critical that it comes at a time where India has diversified its markets, it has diversified its trading partnerships. And of course, the India-EU deal was a very important moment in India's economic journey, but also for the EU, it made a lot of economic sense to tie up with the world's fastest growing economy. So, clearly sending a message to the US that India has several other economic partners who want to work with it.
Absolutely, and you mentioned that because consider the fact that when it comes to tariffs, it's not just India, it was also the EU, lots of European countries who are facing that. Now, let's talk about this in the context of our budget allocations. How do you see the latest U.S.-India trade agreement play out there?
So I think if you look at the budget that has come out just 2 days ago, the major thrust of the budget has really been on domestic manufacturing and what India is terming as self-reliance or atmanirbharta. So what we find is that there's a huge focus on setting up rare earth corridors. There's a huge focus on the semiconductor and electronics industry. There's a huge focus also on indigenization of supply chains and bringing in more and more domestic production to India. And of course, an export led development model also being touted, especially in light of the India UK free trade agreement earlier this year, actually earlier in 2025, and also the India EU free trade agreement. So I think the budget really is a long term budget that came out this year. And when we look at the announcement of this deal, it ties in very well with the focus areas that India has outlined for itself for the next decade, because these are sectors in which India is seeking foreign investment, be it semiconductors, be it electronics, be it rare earths. And the US is interested in actually providing some of that foreign investment to countries like India. So I think there is a huge complementarity there from both sides. And there is also potential for both the governments as well as for businesses in these industries, particularly, but not limited to these, to work together. And I think also India's AI aspirations. I mean, India has laid out its AI aspirations quite clearly in the economic survey, actually. And we find that the economic survey has actually emphasized applications AI and small AI for India, where we actually look at the fact that there is a large AI infrastructure or an LLM already built, but then how do you use that to create products for different sectors? And I think this is again where the complementarity comes in.
Right. That's an interesting point you put there. But also, let's talk about oil. You know, we know that the tariff was put on India considering the fact that we were buying Russian oil. In the statement that came out from both the leaders, Trump and PM Modi, when PM Modi replied, he didn't really mention Russian oil. But when we see, Trump's statement, he mentions the Russian oil, that India will stop buying it, and also a look at Venezuelan oil, perhaps. How do you read into this as of now?
So, I mean, when we think about a rules based trading system, it is completely fair for any country to ask another one in which it's getting into an agreement or a deal. Please purchase more goods and services from me. So if country A says, please buy more oil from me or from companies that I control, that is absolutely fair. But when a country says that you have to buy oil from me, but you can't buy oil from another country, then that goes against the international rules-based trading system. So therefore, you can understand that this negotiation is going to be difficult for India, because at the end of the day, Russia has been India's long-term partner. Russia has been a long ally for India throughout the last 60 to 70 years. And India has a stated policy of being non-aligned, which it continues to practice till today. So therefore, it will be continuing with its friendship with Russia. So it is quite difficult for any country to then commit, oh, we will bring down our purchases of Russian oil to absolutely zero. So I think this particular condition is expected to be a continuing sticking point until the actual deal is announced.
Right. And also, before we let you go, what does this US-India trade agreement mean to the global risks warning highlighted in India's economic survey?
So I think the global risks still remain. I mean, just because we've seen this tweet, just because we've seen this thaw in the relationship, it doesn't mean that, the relationship is absolutely back on track. And also, it doesn't mean that the uncertainty associated with the demonstrated behavior of the US administration goes away. Because in this period, the entire world has seen that there have been a lot of ups and downs in the kind of announcements that the US administration has been making, particularly the US president has been making. And that is what fuels the geopolitical tension and the uncertainty. So even if you come to a deal, will that deal actually be upheld? Will that bargain actually be upheld? Will the terms be respected for a long term? These always will remain questions in the current context. So I don't think it assuages the global uncertainty and geopolitical tensions in any way. And but of course, it's a welcome development. It's a thaw in the relationship, and it's an important step towards the two countries rebuilding their trust.
Right. Well, of course, we'll have to wait and see if there's any constructive points we see later on. But thank you so much. Always a pleasure having you and discussing all of these. And thank you for giving your opinions on this.